Welcome back to another edition of the Disney Dish Podcast with Jim Hill. It's me, Testa. Let's get started by bringing in the man who says that your Taco Bell order is a better predictor of who you are than astrology. But that's just him talking as a Crunchwrap Supreme. It's Mr. Jim Hill. Jim, how's it going?
Taco Bell, and Pavlov was right, by the way. When you hear the dong of that bell, I do in fact salivate.
All right, and would like to introduce a special guest for today's show. Jim Shull was a Disney Imagineer for 33 years, most recently as Executive Creative Director at Walt Disney Imagineering. Jim designed new rides, shows, attractions, lands, and hotels for Disney theme parks all over the world, including things like Rock and Roller Coaster, the Toy Story lands, and my personal favorite, the Cool Ship stand in the Magic Kingdom's Tomorrowland. Every time I walk by, Jim. Plus, he's worked on Shanghai Disneyland, today's show's topic. Let's welcome Jim to the show. How's it going, Jim Shull?
Greetings, Len and Jim. Guys, I had a great time when I was last here, and I'm really looking forward to this show. So what do you say if we get started?
All right, so we know that you've designed rides and shows for the parks. How did you end up doing a hotel, the Toy Story Hotel for Shanghai?
Well, Len, you got to understand, one of the things about WDI is we're a project-based company, and so I just come off of working several years on the original Toy Story Playland, which went into the Walt Disney Studios in Paris. And like all Imagineers, when you finish a gig, you start looking around for the next one. And so I'm sitting at my desk when my telephone rings, and on the other end of the line is Mr. Bob Weiss, who turns and says to me, hey, I understand you're available. And since you know something about Toy Story and you've worked on Pixar projects before, how would you like to work on a hotel based on Toy Story for this little thing we're doing in Shanghai called Shanghai Disneyland?
I remember hearing that there was a Pixar-themed moderate hotel in the works for Shanghai. And this 800-room hotel at that point wasn't going to be themed around Toy Story. That in fact, at that point, the Imagineers supposedly wanted to theme it around WALL-E. They had focus groups, and the Chinese didn't necessarily respond all that strongly to WALL-E. And so then there was another focus group where they floated the idea of theming the hotel around The Incredibles, and the Chinese didn't respond as strongly as Disney had hoped. So Toy Story was kind of the third time's the charm, the default.
But Shull, how did you get sucked into the project?
Well, again, I'm sitting there with nothing to do, and Bob Weiss calls me and says, "Would you like to do something?" So, I did two things. Immediately I said yes, which in retrospect, I didn't take time to read the fine print, which is, in car buying and accepting assignments, always read the fine print, because 1 week later I found myself standing boots on the ground on Nanjing Road in the middle of Shanghai in the middle of summer. And I have some photographs of myself, and I did not look like a happy camper. I looked like I had swum across the Hangpo River and jumped out to have my photograph taken, because I was dripping, just this sweaty, tired, jet-lagged mess. But I was committed. I was there in Shanghai and, so to speak, stalking the land. Now, remember, at this point, Shanghai Disneyland was still literally marshland. There was nothing there. There wasn't even an office. But we did have an office, not on site, but off-site, and that's where I set up camp to figure out, how do you do a hotel for the Chinese based around a known and famous and beloved Pixar franchise? How do you do that?
And was somebody already working on the hotel project when you became involved? And did you take it over, or was this like from the ground up?
Yes and no. There were people who were working, but they were an architectural firm based in Miami, Florida. They had created the building shell and building program. And I never built or designed a hotel before, but I quickly learned, there's things you can't do. Like, there's going to be a toilet. You can't argue. There's going to be a toilet. It's going to be, and the paper and the roll is going to be to the left. It's going to be a given. And so I inherited that building program, and then I could start to, I had my closet. I could start hanging my clothes in the closet that was already designed. So it was a yes and no. But honestly, I had a pretty open greenfield design arena for me to play and frolic in.
So Jim, you get invited to work on this. Another company at Hardy, taking a stab at the shell of the hotel, which I get, right? That's what their job is. Who do you have to convince, and how do you do that? That you're the person for this job.
What I did was I produced as many drawings as I could in a week, and then I scavenged a couple of 4x4 black gator boards that I could pin the drawings into, and I marched them over into a theater there located at 1401 Glendale on Flower Street. And I walked in there naively with my little boards, and I'm hanging up my little boards, and I'm looking around, and I realized, oh, crap. Everyone else on the project, for every one of the lands, had over a year. And so I've got 2 boards and a couple of pin drawings.
You've had 20 minutes and a long lunch.
Yeah. They have ferns and video, and they have play actors, and they have artwork, and they have animatics and models and all that. And I've got my little drawings pinned on some borrowed storyboards, and I'm standing there, and the door's open, and here comes Mr. Iger.
Oh.
and you're like, this is the best I could do on short notice. All right. So what do you say? Like, Bob, you are a handsome and powerful man, and here are my 4 drawings. Like, where do you go from there? Like, did he ask questions?
Oh, absolutely. No, he asked a lot of questions. Remember this, the reality is this enormous room with all the video and the potted palms that I was competing against, we're still spending a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of the reputation of the Walt Disney Company for this hotel.
Sure.
And again, it was a beloved franchise. The people at Pixar who had birthed this franchise really cared deeply about it. So I talked to Bob mostly about what the foundational values were. And Bob quickly, pointed out something that, he wanted as an idea, which was, he said, you're not going to make this like the art of animation in Florida, are you? And I thought, what is he really asking? And I realized what he's really asking was, you're not going to make it, childish. I mean, it's obviously art of animation. I've stayed there. It's gorgeous. It's a fantastic hotel. But it's very definitely aimed at the family audience. Whereas in China, you have a different setup. You're dealing with a one-child family. You're dealing with different units, although you may have a room with 3 generations coming to it. So I turned to Bob Iger and I said, look, it's going to be childlike, but never childish, meaning that anyone could come in here and feel very much at home, and the artwork would be new, and the sculpts would be new, and the design would be new, and it would actually be a cut above our normal moderate-priced Florida hotel. It would be something that would really punch above its weight. And he pivoted and said, okay, I'll see you at the opening.
Wow.
Wow. Okay. And everyone who had the animatronics and the dancers were like, "What? That's it? What?"
Honestly, the truth is, at that point, the blood rushed to my head, and I don't remember much of it.
I don't remember anything after that. Next thing I remember, I'm in Shanghai. All right.
Yeah, exactly. In Shanghai, hot and wet.
All right. So Shanghai Disneyland was then going to have both a Toy Story Land and a Toy Story Hotel.
Eventually it would, but not now, because remember, in the original plan, there was no Toy Story Land in that park. It didn't come until much later. In fact, it came, I would say, a year after I was already working on Toy Story Hotel, and I was, at that point, living in Shanghai.
Given that the year previous opened Toy Story Land in Paris, Hong Kong was about to open, this was clearly an idea that was traveling the globe, and it was kind of a not very well kept, dirty little secret that a lot of the parks around the globe were going to have Toy Story Lands, and among them supposedly was Shanghai. But how do you do that then? How do you, understanding that potentially further on down the line, there's going to be a full-blown Toy Story Land inside of Shanghai Disneyland, and yet you've got to create a hotel around that very same IP that has to be similar yet different. I mean, that's got to be a huge challenge.
Well, you do it because you hold some of your cards back. You don't play every card. For example, if you're going to be doing a Toy Story Hotel, You don't put all of the toys and the iconography and the graphics and the figure sculpts that you had in Toy Story Playland or Toy Story Land in Hong Kong in the hotel, because then if you build a Toy Story Land in Shanghai, you've just spent you spent everything that you had as far as idea capital. So basically, it was that 2-lane approach. The first lane was going to be that more childlike but not childish approach, more sophisticated, punch above your weight for the hotel.
And Iger kind of said this, right? He was like, it's going to be authentically Disney but distinctly Chinese.
Yeah, and so then that allowed me then, when I got that second phone call, while I was living in Shanghai at the Kerry Hotel at 4 a.m., again, when they patched me through and said, Bob Weiss is on the phone for you. I said, what? And Bob was on the line and said, hey, good news. We're going to be building the Toy Story Land, and since you're already over there,
it's just cheaper to have you stay another year.
Just save the frequent flyer miles. But anyway, long story short, I was loving to do it because, again, for that project, I don't like doing things a second time, but that I made the exception for, because for Toy Story Land Shanghai, I had a chance to completely rethink it, and it also gave me an opportunity to validate my assumption that you could do a more sophisticated take on the Toy Story franchise and IP for a hotel than you would do for a land.
You stepped into this project and inherited a lot of stuff. And for example, you talked about the firm in Miami that had designed, the build program and the shell of the building, which what I found fascinating is it was shaped like the number 8, right? And you have a building handed to you and it's like, make this Toy Story themed, go. How do you do that?
Backing up the truck, for example, when you have the security cameras, they go to an office and that's part of the figure 8. So I couldn't bump out the building. Whatever the figure 8 was, that was it. That was not going to ever change. However, again, looking to make lemonade, I thought, what does Buzz Lightyear say? What is his catchphrase? To infinity.
You didn't.
I did. I'm shameless.
You didn't.
I'm shameless.
It's a figure 8 because the figure 8 on its side is the symbol for infinity.
And infinity and beyond.
You built a hotel as a sight gag.
Yes, the entire thing. So listeners, go to Google Earth and validate what I just told you.
I am looking at it now.
Wow.
I cannot express how much I love this idea. Like the funniest thing I've ever heard. That is beautiful.
So the other question is, then, I have this figure 8 and I have it on a side, and it's a large, very large building with flat sides. And so you got to do something with that. And so that took a lot of work, a lot of thinking back and forth. And well, I guess you probably have seen photographs of it. And what do you see on the exterior? Have you noticed the glass where there are 2 sets of clouds that are literally inspired by the cloud wallpaper designed from the movies in Andy's bedroom?
Are the clouds 3D? I haven't seen the hotel in person. Are the clouds like 3-dimensional?
It's funny. They actually are in 2 panes of glass, and they're tinted. And the clouds are fritted glass. Now, frit is like a window screen, like the type that you'd have on your car. And the reason for that is to be able to see through it. And here's a factoid. The clouds actually spread over 2 sets of windows. Every room has 2 sets of windows. And so part of the work in the design was calculating to make sure that every room had 1 clear pane of glass. Now, you may ask why.
Why?
Okay, thank you.
I understand a cue.
Because, you're living in a world of social media, and everybody who gets into their room wants to take a photograph outside their room through the glass. And you know what happens if they're shooting through fritted glass? They get a photograph with a lot of grain in it, and they don't like that. So a lot of calculation, a lot of hours was spent trying to do a pattern that we eventually did, and we had to do 3 mock-ups to validate that pattern. But every room has 1 piece of clear glass to take your photograph through.
Can you talk about how you delineated which wing of the hotel people were then staying in?
This was my question. How do you tell people where they are in the resort?
Yeah, true enough, because you can't rely on language. So you rely on pictures or pictographs. And again, remember in China, you're dealing a lot times with 3 generations. So you have the child who knows the characters and who says to the parents, hey, let's go there. The parents who give the child what they want. And the grandparents who are just following along, who have no idea who Toy Story the characters are. So when they're standing checking at the lobby desk, what they're told is, oh, you're staying in the Woody wing or Buzz wing, and the group goes, I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, go over there where the spaceman is. And so as a result, there is literally a 12 by 17 foot lenticular that was custom designed, custom built in China that's hanging on the entrance into the Buzz wing. There's a smaller but similar custom lenticular for the Woody character with Jessie. That's the entrance to the Woody wing. So again, someone there, a cast member at the desk, just simply points and says, go to the cowboy, go to the spaceman.
And these are sort of like the icons that we see in front of Pop Century or Art of Animation or the All-Star Resorts, the giant figures out in front of the hotel, right? The buildings.
Well, no, you're jumping ahead a little bit, and they're not out in front of the hotel. They're actually in the 2 courtyards. Because remember back when we talked a moment ago about the figure 8? Well, every figure 8 then has the donut and the hole, and those are the 2 courtyards. So we had the Woody courtyard and the Buzz courtyard. And the Woody courtyard is right outside the lobby. So when you go to check in, through the glass behind the lobby desk, you see a full-size Woody on bullseye, on blocks, rearing back in the middle of his courtyard.
Oh, got it. Okay, I see it now.
And then directly on the other side of the hotel, in a similar courtyard, there's a figure for Buzz, which, if you've been to Toy Story Playland in Paris, it's exactly that same pose that's there. So that was the second of the 2 Buzzes. He eventually, as a factoid, made another appearance over in Florida in their Toy Story Land. He made another appearance for the 4th time in the Tokyo version of Toy Story Hotel. So Buzz, he does get along and gets around.
So where did the characters outside come from? Same idea?
Well, a lot of it came from working again with the people who knew Toy Story best, which were the people at Pixar. And so we'd lock ourselves. I'd go up to Emeryville and lock myself in a room with them, and we do brainstormings about what's iconic, what's interesting, what's something you can take a photograph of. And so we started developing the pattern and the pose, and then created a digital output, and then created the full-scale carved foam down in Glendale. And eventually, when that was completed, we would have all of the people who needed to come down to Glendale to look and approve it before we would create it and send it off to the vendor in Shanghai.
This was an enormous stature at the Woody and Buzz thing, right? Were you able to assemble it beforehand so people could eyeball it?
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up, Mr. Hill. Yes, we did. But, as large as the clear span warehouse space in 1401 Flower Street is, it wasn't big enough. So, when you look at Woody on Bullseye, well, in order to approve Bullseye, we had to cut Bullseye's legs off and just set him on the ground. And then Woody, when he had his arm in the air holding his hat, we had to take that arm off. And then, moreover, we all had to go as far as we could in that warehouse on a mark on the floor in tape, and we would lie down on our sides on the concrete, because that's the exact position that the guests would be in the field in Shanghai to get their beauty shot of seeing the character.
Wow. You got to admire the amount of thinking that went into that. That's kind of clever. Not going to lie, that's a lot of effort.
Yeah, but my wife didn't appreciate that I was covered with foam dust that night when I came home.
Yeah. You smell like fiberglass and resin.
Oh my God. Can you talk about how you guys decided to sort of tailor Toy Story for the Chinese market?
Well, a lot of it goes back down to research. Remember, we talked a few minutes ago about my first trip in China, standing on Nanjing Road. Well, on Nanjing Road, there's an enormous toy shop, which is why I went there. And so I went down, pulled out my Disney Visa card and bought a lot of toys. Now, mind you, I didn't want Western toys. I wanted Chinese toys. And what I ended up walking out of that store with were several large bags of Chinese toys, such as Chinese tops and Chinese dolls and Chinese kites. And so pulling from that reference, I thought, we need to do kites because everyone knows them, they are familiar with them, and they get that. But that started the process of then going back to Pixar and developing designs for Chinese kites with the Pixar characters.
Oh, nice. That's a nice touch.
It was a nice touch, but it also meant that we had to find out somebody who would actually build these. So again, going into the research, ended up 2 flights, first up to Guangzhou, China, which is famous for building kites. It's also the home of Guangzhou beer. So literally, okay. we would because you don't drive in China. We had a Chinese vendor. Well, in fact, we went to several Chinese vendors. So every time we'd go to a Chinese vendor at the end of the trip, we'd get back into our company van, and the Chinese vendor would come over and 2 bags, a bag of kites for each of the people in our team, and a bag of Guangzhou beer. So at the end of that week of travel, we ended up with the back of the van filled with beer. And again, we're at the end of our trip and thinking, what can we do with this? And we ended up gifting it to our van driver. And
sure,
he didn't speak any English, but he could certainly smile broadly.
Yeah. I don't know that we're ever going to use vendors for this show, Jim. But if we do, I'd like to be handed a bag of kites and a bag of beer at the end of every interaction. I just think that's civilized, you know?
You're not wrong. Now, by the way, just to sort of bring things back to the Pixar Place project in Anaheim, which again, ongoing through December of this year. And again, they are adding pieces every week to that thing. Do we know if they're doing any oversized character pieces there as well? I mean, similar to the Woody and the Bullseye and in the courtyard off the lobby of the Shanghai hotel, or
no, I haven't heard anything of that. But again, one of the notes I'll make about the Pixar Place Hotel is, I don't hold a judgment for it because, like movies, I don't judge a movie based on the trailer, and putting Luxo into the hotel doesn't mean that they're done by a long shot.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, Shull, that they're trying actively to tie the hotel to Pixar Pier, the land within DCA?
Not any longer. I think that ship, sailed. I mean, if you go back in time, when we were working on Paradise Pier 2.0, there was a real effort then to take the old Pan Pacific Hotel and make that the Pixar Hotel, the Pixar Pier Hotel. And they did a lot of work. They did a new painting on the exterior. They did a graphics package. Right. And then the crenellated wave. Everyone remembers the crenellated wave on the top because purpose was, well, you remember, and you reacted the way they wanted you to. When you'd stand in the pier, you'd look across at the hotel and think, oh, they're connected.
Yeah.
Now you have the Pixar Pier, but across the way you don't have the Pixar Pier Hotel. You have the Pixar Place Hotel. So for that reason, they're not done, and I don't know if they intend them to visually connect. But we shall see.
Oh, I think, Len, weren't you saying when we were in the park, because I guess they were putting the initial white primer coat or whatever on the outside of the hotel? And I
was waiting for the giant red cross to be painted on the side so it could look more like a hospital. Like, are helicopters going to land on here with patients?
Yeah, it does have that. It does have an insurance company vibe to it.
But again, they have till December, so we can hope that things improve. And Mr. Shull, you'll be headed back there in the next couple months, down to Anaheim, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll be swinging by as I normally do, and I will absolutely be sure to check in and see how they're doing.
You going on that 186-foot water slide?
There are some things I take off the table. I do a lot for my craft, but sliding down a nearly 190-foot slide is not one of them, Len.
Not one of those things, huh? All right, fair enough. It's what happens when you retire and have to pay for your own health insurance, right?
Go figure. Stay healthy.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for our show today.